An Apache woman appeared in his cabin before dawn, the reason that stunned the frontier. The winter night had wrapped the frontier in a deep silence, broken only by the occasional whisper of wind brushing against the frost-covered trees. The snow lay in thick, uneven layers across the rugged landscape, and the cold had a way of reaching even the warmest corners of the small wooden cabin where the rancher lived. He had built it himself many years ago, using strong timber and his knowledge of the land. Life in the frontier had taught him self-reliance, patience, and the ability to face danger without hesitation. The rancher had always preferred solitude. The company of others often brought trouble in a place where trust was scarce and danger was frequent. He was stirring awake as he usually did before sunrise, when the first light barely touched the horizon. He moved quietly, careful not to wake the animals in the small stable beside the cabin. The soft creak of his wooden floorboards was the only sound as he walked to the small window and looked out. The land stretched endlessly, covered in frost, the hills rolling in the dim morning light. Everything was still except for the soft shadows of the trees swaying in the wind. Just as he was about to return to prepare his breakfast, a faint, hesitant knock echoed through the quiet cabin. The rancher froze. The hour was early, too early for anyone to visit. And in these lands, unexpected visitors could bring trouble. His hand instinctively moved to the worn rifle that leaned against the wall, but he paused, listening carefully. The knock came again, soft, almost pleading. With cautious steps he approached the door, his heart beating steadily but alertly. He peered through the small glass pane and saw her. She was an Apache woman, standing just outside, wrapped in a shawl that could barely protect her from the sharp bite of the winter cold. Her eyes were wide and filled with a mix of fear and determination. The rancher had seen travelers before, but never someone like her alone in the wilderness, and certainly not at this hour. He opened the door slowly, keeping one hand on his rifle. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. The woman shivered, partly from the cold and partly from fear. She spoke quickly, almost in a whisper. "Please, I need your help. My life depends on it." The rancher studied her carefully. He could see she had traveled far. The dirt on her boots, the wear in her clothing, and the urgency in her movements told a story of a long, harsh journey. He noticed a small bundle clutched tightly against her chest, hidden under her shawl. His mind raced. In this land, people rarely came seeking help without reason, and danger often followed the unexpected. Still, something in her eyes spoke of desperation, and the rancher could not turn her away. "Come in," he said, finally stepping aside. The woman entered quickly and he closed the door behind her. The warmth of the cabin brushed against her chilled skin, and she let out a small sigh of relief. The rancher set a pot of water on the stove, starting a fire to chase away the morning chill. The room filled with the soft crackle of flames, and for a moment, silence returned. But it was a tense silence. The woman finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "I have nowhere else to go," she said. "They are after me, and the child. I cannot go back. Please, I need safety, even for just a short while." The rancher's eyes narrowed as he looked at her. "The child?" he asked. She nodded, gently shifting the bundle closer to her. He gestured for her to place it on the small table. As she carefully unwrapped the shawl, the rancher saw a little boy, no more than 3 years old. His eyes were wide with fear, but there was a quiet trust in the way he looked at the woman. The rancher's heart tightened. The boy was fragile, innocent, and completely dependent on the courage of the woman before him. The woman continued, her voice steadying as she told her story. She explained that the boy was her son, the child of her late husband, who had been a respected leader among their people. After his death, enemies from a rival group had pursued them relentlessly. She had traveled for days through the snow and wilderness, avoiding roads and settlements, in hopes of finding someone who could help. She had chosen his cabin because she had heard of his reputation, of a man who could be trusted, even in dangerous times. The rancher listened carefully, the tension in the room growing heavier with each word. He knew the risks of helping her. Settlers in nearby areas were wary of the Apache, and many believed in strict separation between groups. But as he looked at the woman's eyes and the small child, he felt something he had not felt in years. An undeniable pull to do what was right, even if it put him at risk. The woman's hand shook slightly as she wrapped the boy in an extra blanket he had found in the cabin. "I couldn't trust anyone else," she said softly. "I had to come here, before it was too late." The rancher nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He knew that by agreeing to help, he was putting himself in potential danger. But he also knew that turning them away would be a betrayal of his own sense of humanity. The morning light began to creep through the small window, casting pale rays across the wooden floor. Outside, the wind continued to howl through the trees, carrying with it the promise of a harsh day. Inside, the rancher and the woman began to plan. He offered her food and hot water, while she explained the threats they faced and the urgency of staying hidden. Despite the cultural differences and the tension in the air, a fragile trust began to form. The rancher admired her courage, the bravery it took to travel alone through a dangerous land with a child. And the woman, in turn, recognized his willingness to help, even when danger was near. Together they quietly began to prepare for the day ahead, each aware that the frontier was unforgiving, and that every decision could mean life or death. Hours passed slowly. The woman told stories of her journey, describing the challenges she had faced and the people she had met along the way. The rancher listened intently, offering advice where he could, teaching her small ways to survive in the harsh winter. He could see the determination in her eyes, and he knew that the bond forming between them was more than just necessity. It was respect, trust, and shared humanity. Outside, the snow glistened under the weak sunlight, untouched and pure, yet it reminded the rancher of the dangers lurking just beyond the cabin. Every shadow, every sound could signal trouble. But inside, the fire burned steadily, the warmth wrapping around the woman and her child, offering a small sense of safety in a world that had been unkind to them. As the morning advanced, the rancher realized that this unexpected visit had changed something inside him. He had lived for years in isolation, relying only on himself, yet here he was, caring for a woman and child he barely knew. The frontier had always been about survival, but now it was about compassion, courage, and the choice to protect those who could not protect themselves. He glanced at the woman who now sat quietly beside the table, her eyes tired but determined. The child slept peacefully, unaware of the danger that had chased them across the wilderness. The rancher felt a sense of purpose he had not known in years. The world outside was harsh and unforgiving, but within the walls of this small cabin, there was a chance, just a chance, for safety, trust, and perhaps a new beginning. For the first time that day, the wind outside seemed less threatening. The rancher had made his decision. He would help them. He did not know what challenges lay ahead or what dangers would come knocking at his door. But he knew that before dawn, when an Apache woman had appeared seeking help, a choice had been made, a choice that would change the course of their lives forever. The first light of morning gradually filled the cabin, casting a soft, golden glow across the rough wooden walls. Outside, the frost sparkled on the branches, and the wind whispered through the trees, but inside there was a quiet warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold and harsh wilderness beyond the door. The Apache woman had wrapped her child snugly in the blankets the rancher had provided, and for the first time in days, the boy slept without fear. The rancher moved quietly around the cabin, fetching a small pot of oatmeal and warming water for tea. He kept glancing at the woman, noticing the worry etched into her face and the exhaustion in her eyes. She had traveled a long way, and her journey had been far from easy. He wondered how she had survived the dangers of the winter, the wild animals, and the people who might wish them harm. Finally, unable to hold back his curiosity any longer, he asked, "Tell me everything. Why are you here? Who is after you?" The woman took a deep breath and hesitated, her eyes meeting his. She seemed to weigh her words carefully. "It is not just me," she began softly. "It is my son. They want him. They want to harm him because of who his father was." I cannot go back to my people. Not yet. Not while they are looking for him. The rancher listened, his expression serious. He could feel the weight of her words. In these lands, disputes and rivalries often lasted for years. He had heard stories of families torn apart by revenge, and he knew that the frontier was not forgiving to those who tried to run from it. "What did your husband do?" he asked carefully, sensing that every detail mattered. "He was a leader among our people," she said quietly. "He tried to keep peace, but some did not want peace. When he died, the enemies thought it would be easy to take what they wanted. My son." Her voice shook, but her eyes remained steady. "They believe if they get him, they can gain power, influence, even revenge. I cannot let that happen." The rancher felt a surge of respect for her bravery. Traveling alone through the wilderness with a small child was already a remarkable feat, but doing so under the constant threat of danger showed extraordinary courage. He realized that helping her was not just about compassion, it was about survival, strategy, and quick thinking. Every decision he made now could affect the lives of all three of them. He sat down across from her and asked, "How long have you been running?" She hesitated, then said, 3 weeks. Maybe more. It is hard to remember the days. Each one has been a battle. Hiding, moving, staying quiet. Sometimes I feared we would not make it to dawn. The rancher nodded. He understood the challenges she had faced. Life in the frontier demanded constant vigilance. He thought of the many times he had faced danger, whether from wild animals or bandits, and he realized that her courage rivaled anything he had experienced.
"You did well to come here," he said.
"You chose wisely." She looked at him with gratitude, but also with concern. "I could not trust many," she said.
"I have heard stories of people turning strangers away, but something told me
You might help. I had no choice but to risk everything to come here." The rancher studied the boy, who was now stirring slightly in his sleep. "And him?" he asked, gently nudging the child. The woman smiled faintly. "He is my heart," she said. "He is all I have left of the family I lost. I cannot let them take him."
As the morning light grew brighter, the rancher began to assess their situation.
He knew that staying in the cabin openly would be dangerous if word spread. People in nearby settlements were quick to judge and slow to trust. Some would see the Apache woman as a threat, not understanding her story. And there were always those who might hunt the child for their own gain. "We need a plan," he said finally. "You cannot stay here openly for long. We need to think carefully about what to do next." The woman nodded, her expression resolute. "I trust you," she said. "I do not have anyone else. If we can survive here, even for a little while, it may give us a chance to think, to plan." The rancher moved to the window, looking out at the endless fields and forests. "I know the land well," he said. "I can help you stay hidden. But we must be cautious. We cannot make mistakes." He glanced back at the woman. "Are you ready to follow my lead?" She nodded, understanding the seriousness in his voice. "Yes," she said. "I will do whatever it takes to protect my son." Over the next few hours, they worked together to secure the cabin. The rancher checked all the windows and doors, making sure they were firmly closed and could be barricaded if necessary. He gathered firewood and supplies, knowing that if they were trapped for a day or more, they would need food and warmth. The woman helped where she could, showing remarkable calm despite the danger surrounding them. As they worked, she began to tell him more about her journey. She spoke of long nights hiding in forests, of the harsh cold that bit at her skin, of rivers she had crossed and mountains she had climbed. She told him about the people she had encountered, some helpful, some suspicious, some hostile. Through her words, the rancher realized just how much she had endured to reach safety. He asked her about her husband, and she shared memories of him with quiet reverence. He had been a man of honor, she said, committed to his people and to keeping peace wherever possible. His death had left a void not only in her life, but in the lives of those who depended on him. "He would have wanted me to protect our son," she said, "and I will do so, no matter the cost." The rancher felt a deep respect for her determination. He understood that courage was not always about fighting. It was about persistence, wisdom, and the ability to endure hardship without giving in to fear. She embodied all of these qualities, and he realized that together they stood a better chance of surviving whatever dangers lay ahead. By midday, the boy had awakened, rubbing his eyes and looking around the cabin. The rancher offered him some warm oatmeal, which he accepted reluctantly, still cautious of his new surroundings. The woman watched closely, whispering words of comfort and encouragement. The child's trust was slow to develop, but he responded to her presence, and eventually, he relaxed enough to eat and even smile briefly. As the day progressed, the rancher and the woman discussed their next steps. They knew they could not remain in one place for too long, but they also understood that leaving immediately could put them in even greater danger. The rancher suggested creating a hidden area within the cabin, a place where the child could be kept out of sight if anyone came looking. The woman listened carefully, nodding in agreement. Together, they moved furniture and created a small, concealed space behind a stack of firewood and blankets. It was cramped, but it would provide safety if needed. They also discussed signals and codes, subtle ways to communicate if danger approached. Every detail mattered, and every precaution could make the difference between life and death. The afternoon passed slowly, filled with quiet preparation and careful conversation. Outside, the wind continued to howl and the snow drifted gently across the frozen ground. Inside, the cabin was a haven of warmth, safety, and growing trust. The rancher and the woman had become more than mere allies. They had formed a fragile bond, built on shared purpose and mutual respect. As evening approached, the woman looked out the window at the fading light. "Do you think they will come?" she asked quietly. The rancher did not answer immediately. He had faced many dangers in his life, but the uncertainty of human threats was always the most difficult to predict. "Perhaps," he said finally, "but we are ready, and we will face whatever comes together." The child slept again, exhausted from the day's events. The woman sat beside him, whispering words of comfort, her hand resting protectively on his small shoulder. The rancher watched silently, feeling a mix of admiration and responsibility. This small family, thrown together by circumstance, had become his concern. He had never sought it, but now he could not turn away. As night fell, the cabin was quiet except for the crackling of the fire. The rancher made one final check of the doors and windows, ensuring that everything was secure. He knew that the frontier was unpredictable, that danger could appear at any moment. But he also knew that courage, careful planning, and trust could provide a chance to survive, even in the harshest conditions. The woman sat with her son in her lap, and the rancher took a seat nearby. Neither spoke much, but the silence was comfortable. They had shared the day, faced the unknown, and begun to build a plan for survival. In the heart of the frontier, where trust was rare and danger constant, they had found a moment of peace. And as the stars appeared above the cabin, twinkling through the clear winter sky, the rancher realized that this was only the beginning. The journey ahead would be difficult, filled with uncertainty and challenge. But for the first time, he felt a sense of purpose beyond his own survival, a purpose to protect the woman and her child, to stand against the dangers of the frontier, and to face whatever came before dawn once more. The night outside was darker than usual, the kind of darkness that seemed to swallow the cabin whole. The wind howled like a wild animal, bending the trees and pushing icy snowflakes against the rough wooden walls. Inside, the fire burned low, casting long, flickering shadows that danced across the cabin. The rancher sat quietly, listening to every sound, while the Apache woman held her sleeping child close, whispering soft words that only he could hear. The quiet was heavy, and the tension in the air was almost palpable. Hours passed slowly. The rancher kept glancing toward the door, the windows, even the small trap door to the cellar. He had a feeling that danger was approaching. His instincts, honed over years of frontier life, were sharp. He had faced wolves, harsh storms, and even hostile travelers. But the threat of humans coming for the child was different. More unpredictable, more dangerous. He spoke in a low voice to the woman. "Stay close to the child. If anyone comes, stay hidden. Don't make a sound. Do you understand?" She nodded, clutching the boy tightly, her eyes reflecting both fear and determination. "I understand," she whispered. "I will do whatever it takes." The rancher moved to the door and peered through the small window. He could see nothing in the darkness, only the shifting shadows of snowdrifts and trees. But he sensed movement, small, almost imperceptible, the kind that told him someone was approaching carefully, trying to avoid notice. His heart quickened. This was what they had feared. The people who were after the child had found them. He returned to the woman and whispered, "They are coming. We need to be ready." Her eyes widened, but she did not panic. Instead, she gently laid the child down in the hidden space they had prepared, covering him with blankets. The rancher handed her a small lantern and motioned toward the back of the cabin, where a stack of firewood could serve as a barrier. "Stay here. Don't come out unless I signal you. Do you understand?" "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. She held the lantern close, her hands trembling slightly as she waited. Outside, footsteps crunched softly in the snow. The rancher could hear low voices murmuring to one another, cautious but determined. He strained to listen. "He's in here somewhere," one voice said. "We know he's here. Don't let him get away this time." The rancher's jaw tightened. They had found them, and the night that had seemed quiet and safe was now filled with imminent danger. The rancher grabbed his rifle and moved silently to the window, trying to gauge the number of people outside. He could see shadows moving between the trees, figures cloaked in dark clothing, carefully avoiding the snow where possible. There were at least 3 of them, possibly more. They were organized, methodical, and dangerous. He turned back to the woman and whispered, "They are careful. They know what they are doing. We cannot make a mistake." She nodded, gripping the lantern tightly. "I will stay quiet," she said. "I promise." Minutes passed, each one stretching endlessly. The footsteps moved closer, stopping at times as if the attackers were listening for a response. The rancher held his breath, feeling the weight of every second. He knew that if they were discovered, the child's life, and the woman's, would be at risk. He had faced danger before, but never like this, where the stakes were personal and immediate. Suddenly, a shadow appeared at the edge of the cabin. One of the men was peering toward the door, looking for signs of movement. The rancher adjusted his position, aiming his rifle but keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He did not want to provoke them yet. He needed to wait for the right moment. The tension was unbearable, every creak of the cabin floorboard and every gust of wind making his heart race faster. The woman, sensing the gravity of the situation, whispered to herself, "Stay calm, be quiet, protect him." Her hand rested lightly on the child's shoulder, a silent promise that she would do anything to keep him safe. The rancher admired her courage. She was facing this danger with a strength that matched his own, and together they had a better chance of surviving. Time seemed to stretch into eternity. The footsteps and voices outside moved carefully, circling the cabin, trying to find a way in. The rancher knew he had to act, but he needed a plan that would keep the child safe and give them a chance to escape if necessary. He quietly pointed to the back door and whispered to the woman, "If they try to break in, take him and go through the hidden path behind the cabin. Stay in the woods until it is safe, do you understand?" "Yes," she replied, her voice firm. "I will go if you tell me." The footsteps paused near the front door. The rancher could see a shadow moving closer, reaching for the handle. He gripped his rifle tightly, ready to defend the cabin if needed. But then he realized something. The attackers were not alone. A dog barked in the distance, and more shadows appeared, moving cautiously around the perimeter. The situation was growing more complicated, and they were surrounded by uncertainty. He took a deep breath, keeping his nerves steady. He could not afford panic. Not now, he thought quickly, considering all the options.
There was no way to fight them all directly. The risk was too high.
But if he could buy time, create confusion, and keep the attackers focused on the wrong place, the woman and child could escape. He moved silently to the window again, making small noises that suggested activity inside the cabin. One of the attackers reacted, moving closer to investigate. The rancher knew this was his chance. He whispered to the woman, Get ready. Move as soon as I signal." She nodded, clutching the child tightly. Outside, the attackers grew more suspicious. One of them called out, "We know you're here, don't try to hide." The rancher stayed calm, letting his presence remain hidden. He could hear the frustration in their voices, the impatience growing. He knew that fear and confusion could work in their favor. Then, he made a small, deliberate noise near the front door, just enough to draw attention. One of the attackers moved quickly toward the sound, and the rancher signaled to the woman. She carefully lifted the child and slipped toward the back of the cabin, moving through the hidden path they had prepared. The rancher watched her go, heart pounding, knowing that the safety of the boy now depended on her skill and courage. The attackers discovered the noise, but by then, it was too late. The woman and child were gone, hidden in the shadows of the forest. The rancher stayed behind, keeping the attackers' attention focused on the cabin. He used the firelight and shadows to make it seem as if someone was still inside, moving cautiously. The men called out, their voices frustrated and angry, but they could not find the hidden family. Minutes passed, which felt like hours, and then slowly the attackers began to move away, realizing that the cabin was empty, or at least that their quarry had escaped. The rancher waited until the sounds of footsteps faded completely before allowing himself to breathe. The danger had passed for now, but he knew that the frontier was unpredictable, and threats could return at any moment. He moved quickly to the back of the cabin, following the hidden path. He found the woman and child waiting among the trees, safe but tense. She looked at him with relief and gratitude, and the boy clung to her, sensing the shared tension.
"They didn't find us,"
she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "No," the rancher said quietly. "We were careful. We moved at the right time." He looked around at the dark forest, knowing that they could not stay here long. The attackers might return, and the winter night was far from over. But for now, they were safe, and that was enough to give them a moment of calm. The woman smiled faintly, holding the child close. "Thank you," she said. "I don't know what we would have done without you." The rancher shook his head. "We did this together. You were brave. Don't forget that."
They moved quietly through the trees, careful to avoid leaving tracks in the snow.
The rancher led them to a small clearing where he knew they could find temporary shelter, a natural depression in the land that would protect them from wind and visibility. He built a small fire, careful not to let the smoke rise too high, while the woman prepared the child to rest. As they sat together in the small clearing, the rancher realized how much had changed in just one day.
The Apache woman and her son had arrived at his cabin before dawn, seeking help, and now they had survived their first night of danger together.
A bond had formed, one forged in trust, courage, and the shared understanding that survival depended on careful planning and courage. He looked at the woman and child, feeling a sense of responsibility that went deeper than he had ever known. The frontier was harsh and danger was everywhere, but for this moment, they had found safety and hope.
And though the night had been filled with fear, it had also shown him something important, that courage and compassion could create strength even in the face of overwhelming odds.
Outside, the snow continued to fall softly, covering the land in a quiet blanket of white. The wind still whispered through the trees, but inside the clearing there was warmth, safety, and the quiet understanding that they were no longer alone. Together they would face whatever came next, whatever challenges the frontier had in store, knowing that before dawn, anything was possible if they trusted one another and stood together. The first light of dawn broke slowly over the frontier, painting the snow-covered land in soft shades of gold and pink. The cold air carried a quiet stillness, but inside the small clearing there was warmth, safety, and a sense of relief. The Apache woman had kept her child close throughout the night, whispering gentle words of comfort while the rancher had kept watch, alert for any sign of danger. The long, tense night was over, and for now, the threat that had hunted them had passed. The woman carefully lifted the child, brushing the snow from his small coat and checking that he was warm. He stirred in her arms, rubbing his eyes and looking around with the curiosity of a child who had just survived something he could not fully understand. The rancher handed her a cup of warm water, and she smiled gratefully. "You have done so much for us," she said softly, her voice filled with gratitude and quiet exhaustion. The rancher shook his head. "We did it together," he replied. "You were brave. Your courage kept both of you alive." She looked at him, eyes shining, and for a moment there were no words. The bond between them had grown strong during the long night. Trust, respect, and a shared determination had formed something more than alliance. It was a connection built on survival, empathy, and hope. They moved cautiously back toward the cabin, careful to avoid leaving tracks in the soft snow that could reveal their hiding place. The frontier was unpredictable, and though the immediate danger had passed, the world outside remained harsh and unforgiving. The rancher led the way, stepping carefully, while the woman held her son close, whispering words of reassurance to him. The child, sensing the safety in her voice, allowed himself to relax, his small hands curling around her coat. As they approached the cabin, the woman spoke quietly. "What will we do now?" she asked. Her voice carried worry but also a growing sense of hope. "We cannot stay here forever," the rancher replied. "We need to find a safe place, somewhere no one will think to look for us, at least until the danger passes. But for today, this cabin is our shelter." Inside, the warmth of the fire offered comfort after the long, cold night. The rancher moved quickly to prepare a simple breakfast while the woman arranged the blankets and made the child comfortable. The cabin, once just a lonely space for one man, had become a refuge for 3 lives intertwined by circumstance and courage. As they ate in silence, the rancher began to understand the full weight of what the woman had endured. Traveling alone with a small child hunted by those who wished them harm required unimaginable courage. Each step of her journey had been dangerous, each night a test of endurance. And yet, despite the fear and uncertainty, she had persevered, never losing sight of her goal, to protect her son. The rancher spoke gently. "You have done everything right. I have faced many dangers in my life, but what you have done, it is extraordinary." She looked at him, a faint smile on her lips. "I had no choice," she said softly. "I could not let them take him. I could not let him suffer. I would face any danger to keep him safe." The child stirred, looking up at the rancher with wide eyes. He had begun to sense the safety of the cabin, the warmth of the fire, and the presence of people who cared for him. The rancher knelt down, offering a gentle smile. "Hello there," he said softly. "You are safe now." The boy's small fingers reached out, and the rancher felt a strange but comforting sense of connection. By midday, the snow had begun to melt slightly under the weak winter sun, revealing patches of brown earth and frost-covered grass. The rancher and the woman took the opportunity to step outside and survey the area. They needed to plan for the days ahead, considering both safety and sustenance. The frontier was harsh, and survival required constant vigilance, careful planning, and knowledge of the land. They decided to create a small signal system, subtle signs that would allow them to communicate if danger approached again. The rancher also showed the woman how to recognize safe paths through the snow, how to use the trees and natural formations for cover, and how to move quietly without leaving traces. She listened attentively, absorbing every detail, knowing that each piece of knowledge could mean the difference between safety and disaster. As they worked together, a quiet understanding grew between them. Words were not always necessary. The way they moved, watched, and protected each other spoke volumes. Trust had been earned through shared experience, courage, and the willingness to act selflessly. The rancher had learned to admire her bravery, patience, and intelligence, while the woman had come to recognize his steadiness, wisdom, and care. They were no longer just allies. They were a team, bound by circumstance but strengthened by respect and shared humanity. The afternoon passed in a mixture of quiet work and cautious observation. The child played softly in the corner of the clearing, occasionally glancing at the adults, his small voice carrying questions and laughter that brought lightness to the otherwise tense environment. The rancher and the woman took turns keeping watch, understanding that danger could still be near. But for now, the world felt a little safer, a little warmer, and a little more hopeful. As the day turned to evening, they heard distant sounds in the valley below. Voices carried faintly on the wind, but it was impossible to determine whether they belonged to friends or foes. The rancher decided it was too risky to stay any longer in one place, even the cabin. "We need to move before night falls," he said. "The more time we spend in one place, the greater the risk of being discovered." The woman nodded, gathering the child carefully in her arms. "Where will we go?" she asked. The rancher thought for a moment, recalling an old cave in the hills where he had taken shelter during a storm years before. It was hidden from view, difficult to access, and provided natural protection from both the wind and prying eyes. "There's a place I know," he said. "It is safe, at least for now. We can rest there and decide our next steps." They moved quietly through the snow, the rancher leading the way and the woman following closely with her son. The journey was slow and careful, each step measured to avoid leaving tracks. The wind bit at their faces, but they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that safety and a chance to breathe freely awaited them. By the time they reached the cave, the sun had dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the land. The entrance was small and easily overlooked, protected by large rocks and thick underbrush. The rancher helped the woman and child inside, arranging blankets to make a comfortable sleeping area. They were safe, for now, but the experience had left them all weary, both physically and emotionally. The woman sat by the child, brushing his hair gently, while the rancher stoked a small fire in the back of the cave. The flickering light illuminated their faces, highlighting exhaustion but also a quiet relief. "We made it," she whispered, almost to herself. "We are safe," the rancher nodded. "For now," he replied. "And we will stay safe as long as we remain careful and work together." As night fell completely, they huddled close to the fire. The child slept peacefully between them, a small, gentle rhythm of breathing that reassured both adults. The frontier outside was dark and unpredictable, but inside the cave there was warmth, safety, and a moment of calm. The rancher reflected on the events of the past days. The unexpected knock on his door, the courage of the woman, and the perilous journey they had survived. It had all started before dawn, with a woman appearing at his cabin, shivering, desperate, and carrying a child. He had not expected his life to change, but now he understood that some moments, some choices, could alter the course of everything. By helping them, he had not only saved lives, but also forged a connection that went beyond words, built on courage, trust, and shared purpose. The woman spoke softly, breaking the silence. "Do you think they will come again?" she asked. The rancher considered her question carefully. "Perhaps," he said, "but we are stronger than they realize. We have survived this far, and we will survive what comes next." They shared a quiet moment, each reflecting on the journey that had brought them together. The child stirred slightly, sensing the calm but alert presence of his protectors. The rancher smiled gently at him. "You are safe now," he said, "and we will do everything we can to keep it that way." Outside, the stars began to twinkle in the clear winter sky, their light bright against the darkness. The snow shimmered faintly under their glow, and the wind had softened to a gentle whisper. Inside the cave, the fire flickered, casting a warm glow over the small family. They had survived danger, fear, and uncertainty, and in doing so had discovered the strength that comes from courage, trust, and unity. The night was long, but it was filled with hope. They had faced the frontier together, and they had prevailed. The woman, her child, and the rancher had proven that even in the harshest of lands, acts of bravery, compassion, and resilience could create safety and light in the darkest of times. And as dawn approached once again, they knew that they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, not alone, but together, stronger for the bond they had formed in the trials they had overcome. The frontier had been stunned by their survival, though no one in the nearby settlements yet knew the full story. In time, whispers of the rancher's bravery and the courage of the Apache woman would spread, leaving a lasting impression on all who heard it. But for now, in the quiet of the cave, they had something even more valuable: safety, hope, and the knowledge that before dawn, anything was possible when courage, compassion, and determination guided their steps.